Hello, my name is Nicholas Channels. This is my presentation for COMM 455 and my discussion on leadership language. So now what exactly is leadership language? Essentially, leadership language is the ability and technique a leader uses to convey his or her vision and direction to followers. The usage of this language is essential for a leader to properly connect with and lead his or her followers. Now, it cannot be understated how important a leader's ability to articulate the organization's mission will determine the effectiveness, outreach, and perception of this message. While it's easy now to see the value in this information, management researchers have only recently begun to highlight the relationship between leadership and language. Now, leadership language is often what determines the identity of an executive as an inspiring speaker and a rhetorician. Now, the reading highlights the importance of executives and managers to recast their image as more aligned with an effective political leader in an ever-increasing educated and intrinsically motivated workplace. Now, we move forward to our main topic. Leadership language is broken into two subtopics. These two are framing and rhetorical crafting. While framing is extremely useful and interesting in its own right and definitely deserves its own presentation, in this presentation we will focus solely on rhetorical crafting. So now, what exactly is rhetorical crafting? Well, rhetorical crafting is the process of a leader to use symbolic language to give emotional power to their message. The most important idea of rhetorical crafting is that the leader is not merely conveying this information, but leading the follower to the idea. In this manner, the leader acts as a guide of ideas, creating a much stronger connection between the idea, leader, and the follower. In traditional communication methods, while the information is conveyed, the message is not intriguing nor vivid. Now, rhetorical crafting sets itself apart from other methods by using symbolic language, as stated before, to make the message interesting and engaging to followers. But why is rhetorical crafting important? As stated before, the main strength of rhetorical crafting is that the leader is the guide of an idea, rather than simply a conveyor of an idea. This has a profound impact on the culture of an organization. Proper rhetorical crafting can lead to better retention and engagement of staff that can shape an organizational identity for decades or longer in some cases. Further, this sense of identity compounds throughout the organization, which creates a stronger sense of unity and organizational culture. This then builds the foundation for the organization going into the future. This can sometimes be the difference between a successful organization and one that struggles to meet change or hardship. If an organization has a strong sense of identity, it is much easier for it to act as a single unit to tackle any challenge it may come across. Now, there are three major methods of rhetorical crafting that are used to connect with followers. These three tools are metaphors, analogies, and organizational stories. Each of these serves a different purpose and has a different impact on the following organization. First, let's start off with metaphors. Now, I'm sure everyone is familiar with metaphors, but let's take a look into what exactly makes a metaphor. A metaphor uses a figure of speech comparing one thing to another to convey a message. Now, this comparison isn't literally true in any way, but it helps us understand the idea trying to be conveyed. If we look at our slide, we can see our Elvis impersonator singing the classic lyrics to "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog." We know he isn't calling anyone a hound dog literally, but he is making the comparison of someone to a hound dog crying all the time. This simplification helps leaders to convey a sometimes complex or hard to explain message in a simple and engaging manner. This has led leaders to use metaphors as more than just a one-time use message. Often, metaphors leave a lasting impact that can be passed down through an organization and/or generations. Here we have some examples of metaphor. First is the cosmetic mogul Mary Kay Ash, founder of Mary Kay Cosmetics and Makeup, a leader in the women in business sphere. She was a staunch proponent of promoting women in business and entrepreneurship. Mary Kay Ash was a regular public speaker and often used metaphors in her speeches. One of her most commonly used metaphors was her bee being able to fly metaphor. It goes as follows. You see, a bee shouldn't be able to fly. Its body is too heavy for its wings, but the bumblebee doesn't know this and it flies very well. She then follows this up by saying, they, referring to women, come to us not knowing they can fly. Finally, with the help and encouragement, they find their wings and then they fly very well indeed. In this, she is using a bee as a comparison to women. It was a long-standing myth that bees were incapable of flight according to physics. Mary Kay Ash was telling the audience that bees defy this by being unaware that they are incapable of flight. This then leads them to become very successful at flying. While obviously this isn't true, it does create a cute and inspiring message. She then connects that to women in business by saying that women are unaware that they can fly, but with some encouragement become very successful. Our next example is the former President John F. Kennedy. JFK was known to be one of the best speaking presidents in history. He was also a regular user of metaphors in his speeches. The example from our reading is as follows. The political profession needs to have its temperature lowered in the cooling waters of the scholastic pool. JFK is comparing the tension and individualistic nature of Washington and its politicians to being hot in a temperature sense. He then paints the picture of this being lowered into a cold body of liquid he says is the scholastic pool. While I was not around to be aware of what situation he was referring to exactly, I do know his presidency saw one of the most tense times of the Cold War. Now, he was obviously not referring to dunking the entire political profession in a scholastic pool, but we can ascertain from this that he was trying to say that his opponents and other politicians need to cool their tension by educating themselves on what needs to be done. Now we come to our next tool, analogies. Analogies and metaphors can be very similar. A metaphor is a statement that focuses on a direct message while using a comparison as a medium. An analogy, on the other hand, focuses entirely on the comparison. Think about a metaphor as reading between the lines, while analogy wants you to focus entirely on what's in front of your face, the comparison. Using one of our previous examples, rather than saying women are like bees with a little encouragement they can fly, I can say that woman dances like a bee. In our metaphor example, the actual comparison to the bee has no value other than the message that women can succeed in business with encouragement. On the other hand, our analogy comparing the woman dancing to a bee, I am directly stating she has similar traits to a bee. In this case, she dances as well as a bee. This then conveys she's a good dancer. Now, leaders use analogies all the time to make quick comparisons. The reading compares an analogy to gift wrapping, where the wrapping can often be as impactful as the gift. In regards to conveying a message, often the analogy can be just as impactful as the message itself. Now, let's look at an example of someone who uses analogies. Lee Iacocca was one of the most successful executives in American automobile history. Lee was credited with playing a major role in the creation of the Mustang, saving Chrysler from bankruptcy, and helping to create Ford's motorsport branch. Now, being a top executive for an American car brand, he was no stranger to speaking engagements with workers as well as the public. As American car manufacturers paint a very vivid picture of their goals and identity, Lee had to become a master of conveying this in his speeches. Now, he did this beautifully and was able to connect with car buyers and factory workers alike. Now, Lee was again able to do this through the usage of rhetorical crafting. While Lee was skilled at using each tool of rhetorical crafting, the following is just one example of his use of analogy. It wasn't the loans that saved us. Although we needed them badly, it was the hundreds of millions of dollars given up by everybody involved. It was like a family getting together and saying, we've got a loan from our rich uncle. Now we're going to prove that we can pay him back. In this analogy, he's comparing himself and his fellow Chrysler employees to a family working towards a common goal and working hard to prove their worth. This comparison creates a sense of unity between him, an executive, and every employee in the company, regardless of position. By the usage of the idea of family, it elevates the topic to be above the material aspect and make it grander than it really was. This makes the listener more sympathetic to him, an executive, as well as normalizing the idea of employees working hard for the sake of the company rather than just simply their paychecks. Now, let's come to our last tool, organizational stories. Organizational stories are slightly unique compared to the other two, as it is not a comparison at all, rather a telling of events. This does not change its usefulness as a method of conveying a message, however. Organizational stories help organizations build a narrative that promote a sense of identity. These stories can be immensely beneficial at building organizational culture and boosting morale. Most people want to feel that their job has some purpose. This oftentimes can be lost in our modern world of globalization. Many organizations don't have the luxury of being a company that produces life-saving medical equipment or put out fires. This is where organizational stories fill a void. A positive and impactful story can leave even a paper salesman motivated and connected to his company. Now, organizational stories are twofold. The message creates a sense of direction, while the rhetoric determines its appeal and ability to influence day-to-day decisions. For our example on organizational stories, we can look at Steve Jobs and the story he created for Apple in 1984. Jobs gave several speeches, including one to the Boston Computer Society, outlining his company's battle with IBM. This compounded with the famous commercial that aired during the 1984 Super Bowl. A popular concern back in the 1980s was the rise of the military state using technology as the medium of control. Jobs fed into this with the idea that IBM was Big Brother, being just a lifeless megacorporation that would rule over society. Jobs then proposed a savior in the form of Apple, who is the small good guy coming to defeat Goliath and restore order and freedom. Now, this is nothing but a story, as both companies are nothing more than megacorporations that want your money then and now. This did, however, create an organization story for employees and company as well as for consumers. This story laid the groundwork for the identity of Apple for decades to come. This marketing campaign separated Apple as being more than just a computer company. It was rebellion from the computer industry as a whole. Now, for a short recap as we wrap up. Leadership language may often be overlooked, but it is absolutely essential for an effective leader. As we look back at influential leaders through history, as well as contemporary ones, we can see that almost all of them leverage leadership language in their toolkit. Leaders use rhetorical crafting on a regular basis to directly shape the culture of an organization from the top down. Without rhetorical crafting, leaders would have a much harder time conveying their ideas, weakening the organization's sense of unity. Now, hopefully this has covered a solid foundation of leadership language and, most importantly, rhetorical crafting. My name is Nicholas Channels. Thank you for watching my presentation, and most importantly, stay healthy.